y'all? This Big Pimpin' 504 back at you. Yo, there's some interesting developments that I gotta bring to light. So, now I know many of y'all saw my last report. Well, no, not many because I've been again shadow banned by TikTok, but whatever. So yeah, they've been muting my videos as of late. I guess what I'm saying is too critical and too on point, you know what I'm saying? But whatever. So check this out. So back in 2015, May 29th, 2015, an economist by the name of Dietrich Muhammad wrote a blog report entitled Capital Flying into the Shadows, where he was discussing how quantitative easing as well as the new bank regulations, specifically the Dodd-Frank Act and the application of the Volcker Rule, created an actual capital flight from traditional banks to the shadow banks. And he also was leading into how the shadow banks comprised of 40%, that's 40% of all U.S. credit. So due to the Volcker Rule, it restricted the banks in their ability to invest in hedge funds. It also required certain capital requirements and liquidity requirements during an environment where there was very little liquidity. And it was during a time period where they were transitioning from zero interest rates to high interest rates under a deflationary period. Now, his report pretty much also showed how there were market makers that were in the banking industry that fled to the shadow banking industry in order to exploit their talents. Well, history has a tendency of repeating itself. And BlackRock, to their credit, has been the most vocal and the most spot on out of everyone about what's going on today in 2023. When we're in the period of deflation, while we have rising interest rates. And right now, the money market funds are at a historical $5.33 trillion. $5.33 trillion. That's the market value right now of the money market funds, or the value of the money market industries. So, with that being said, we're starting to see history repeat itself again. And this is something that was not paid attention to at all during this period of time. So I gotta give credit to Dietrich Muhammad for being the first to even speak on it, the first to even see it, and to even give the details on how it works, why it's happening, and so forth and so forth. But right now, we're starting to see BlackRock. I gotta talk about BlackRock because they've been the most spot on, and they see the opportunity that's going on right now to where businesses, companies, corporations can no longer go to the banks because of their lack of liquidity as well as high interest rates in order to get loans. So they have to go to the private credit markets or the money markets. So they're going to, so right now, actually, BlackRock is actually changing, it's literally changing its entire infrastructure to accommodate private credit. And this is something that I must also speak on as well too. Now, we was talking about, at least my last video, which if you're on TikTok, you probably did not see because again, TikTok has been shadow banning me. But in my last video, I spoke on how the Federal Reserve, with their overnight reverse repo facility, are actually capturing the liquidity from the shadow banks or private credit companies, private credit firms, private equity, hedge funds, venture capitalists, anyone that's in the money markets. They're capturing their liquidity through the overnight reverse repos facility that they created for this, which is detailed in Dietrich Muhammad's report, also on the same day, on Fed's WTH, also May 29, 2015, where he describes in detail on what the overnight reverse repo facility was and how it's going to be used and applied during that time period and again today. So in the last video, I talked on how the feds will get you either way because a lot of people are taking their money out of banks and putting it into money market funds. But the money market funds are putting their money into the overnight reverse repos. But BlackRock is not doing that. Oh no. BlackRock is capitalizing on the fact that companies in mass are looking for liquidity, looking for loans, and are looking to go into the private credit market in order to get those loans. And BlackRock is capitalizing on that. I gotta give it to them. They're very, very intelligent, very, very smart people, especially in this day and age, in this time and hour. I gotta give credit where credit's due. BlackRock's been the most vocal and been most spot on. So, kudos to BlackRock for that. But yeah, so now we're starting to see that same capital flight happen all over again. And even Jamie Dimon is talking about, let's hurry up and get regulations over with. Why? As I explained in my other video, with the IMF and the cryptocurrency market, regulations are designed not so much to make the playing field fair, but actually to restrict and to block out competition. So we see the banks are starting to amass assets from banks who are going down due to the drying up of liquidity and the raising of interest rates. They're just pretty much picking at them, taking their assets and absorbing them into themselves. So private equity firms, not even private equity firms, private capital firms, private capital, we just call them private capital, but shadow banks. Shadow banks is another term for them. They're now becoming, again, the biggest player during this time because just like before, a lot of U.S. credit is now being comprised of shadow banks and shadow banking companies, such as like BlackRock and so forth. So I just want you to go ahead and check out this clip, which pretty much says the same thing that I've been saying since June of last year. Same thing that Dietrich Muhammad noted back in May 29th, 2015 in both of his reports. So just go ahead and take a look at that. And if you want to go ahead and check out the report, you can join my mailing list and we'll send it to you. I have both of those reports on deck. Just go ahead and scan the QR code, go to the website, and I'll have that set up for you. Just join the mailing list and I'll go ahead and send it to you. All right, but not gonna be long. Just let you know what's up. And your boy been proving over and over again the ability to predict the markets accurately and precisely. And this is just another moment. Just wanted to go ahead and just put that out there. But
I guess,
keep it pimping.
Sri, this is really a nod to just how much bigger the PE and private credit universe have gotten.
No, that's absolutely true. Look, sometimes there is a temptation to assume that when a large organization makes a lot of personnel changes, it is just to shake things up. So people get bored, they want to do stuff, keep it exciting. But this is different, right? BlackRock manages $9 trillion in assets. So in some ways, the alternatives business is a niche there, which is a $300 billion business. But the alts business, a number of the alternative investment firms that we've seen over the last couple of decades have done really well. In fact, the previous decade was all about these alternative investing firms, the Blackstones, the Apollos of the world. BlackRock obviously sees a lot of demand there, but unlike other asset managers, you had your traditional fixed income, your equity, and then you had this big box called alts. Now they're saying people are focused on what part of that universe they want to invest in. So they're getting rid of, or more or less getting rid of this bucket called alts and distributing credit, the liquid credit under Rick Rieder, who's someone we know. Then private equity and like the direct equity investing stakes, the opportunistic credit and the direct lending, the private credit market, because that's one part of the business where they're seeing a lot of interest. And that's why they're reorganizing their structure to try and capitalize on that.
So alternatives actually is a misnomer because it's not really alternative anymore. Romain was in LA talking to a lot of asset managers, and pension fund managers are all talking about how they're putting money, allocating money into things like private credit, private equity.
Yeah, if you think about the Milken crowd, anyone who goes there, it would be a complete misnomer to consider them sort of outside the conventional lines of finance. They are conventional finance now.
We'll talk about how you, though, tailor make these products, because I think the reorganization of BlackRock seems to kind of be hitting at that idea here that, of course, you had this big umbrella. It was once a small umbrella. Now it's this big umbrella of assets, and you can't really market it as this big one thing anymore. You have to have it much more tailor-made. And we heard that a lot from a lot of the LPs and some of these funds basically saying they want to see a little bit more niche, if you will.
It was a small umbrella. It is a bigger umbrella. It is not a big umbrella. Of the $300 billion in alts, about $84 billion of that was already liquid credit, your conventional high-yield credit, leveraged finance, CLOs. Again, 20 years back, they might have been novel products. Now they're as mainstream as they get. What they did call out are two important areas.
What's
the
that?
direct equity stakes and investing business.
Yeah.
That's where they're seeing a lot of interest. And private credit, which they're not the first firm to talk about it, but they clearly recognize the opportunity
And
there.
private credit, we're talking about direct lending?
Exactly, direct lending. And that's why they have shifted the person, Jimmy Keenan, who ran all of their credit business, and tasked him with focusing just on this private credit business.
I think, and it's interesting because we bring that up. We were talking a little bit earlier. It was Blackstone and the idea that they're looking to partnership with some of the regional lenders here to, I guess, continue down into that space here. What's sort of the end game for them here? Because at some point there is concern about regulation, right? That the shadow banking system is really not in the shadows anymore. It is the system for the most part here. Shadow banking system is really not in the shadows anymore. It is the system for the most part here. Shadow banking system is really not in the shadows anymore. It is the system for the most part here. And if they do push these products to a level where we get that exponential growth that we saw over the last 10 to 20 years, over the next 10 to 20 years, should they be expecting additional regulation?
There might be additional concern. There might be a lot more scrutiny. But the fact is, these markets are growing. And it doesn't seem like a cyclical thing. This is a secular change that's taking place. Previously, if a company had to borrow money, it went to the bank kept that on its balance sheet. A lot of that has changed, right? That is why we have a thriving leveraged finance market and some of these other changes, the growth of the private credit market. It's hard to see a catalyst right now that would put an end to it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because I think about what's going to drive these alternative businesses, the private businesses, further. And certainly cheap debt helped fuel private equity. Debt is less cheap than it used to be. When it comes to private credit, talk a little bit about how the tighter regulations on banks and the tightened standards for banks is really going to drive private credit in the coming years.
It's been a trend you've seen over the last decade. Banks have to be careful about how much lending they can do. They have to set aside capital for the type of lending that they do. So they are somewhat constrained. But there are these other players who have long-term capital, locked up capital that they can put to work. And then eventually you will see good returns, or at least they've seen good returns. And even though interest rates are being jacked up, and this is not the zero interest rate policy environment we were in a few years ago, it is still a conducive environment for the growth of this private market.